Okay, let's go ahead and look at the second page, and we're going to try and find our odds. So finding the odds is basically you're going to describe the likelihood of an event as a ratio. So this ratio is basically going to compare the number of favorable and unfavorable outcomes. So as we talk about comparing the number of favorable and unfavorable outcomes, let's talk about the odds in favor of the event. So we want this event to happen. So when you're talking about a ratio, again, we're going to use a fraction at this point, and you're going to say the number of favorable outcomes and that's going to be divided by the number of unfavorable outcomes. Okay, so from there, let's talk about the odds against an event. So say you're saying I have a 1 in 100 chance of winning the lottery. This is going to be odds against the event. So you're going to have 99 chances out of 100 not to win the lottery. I know it sounds confusing. So we're going to say the number of unfavorable outcomes over the number of favorable. So the number of unfavorable outcomes over the number of favorable outcomes. And you should also notice that these are reciprocals. And one more thing, see if we can do a different color. You should also know that a ratio is a fraction, decimal, or percent. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that. It's a percent. All right, so let's go ahead and look at some of these. We're gonna use this image right here of this clock or spinny thing. I know it cut it off when it printed, but all of it's supposed to be represented. It says, what are the odds in favor of spinning the number greater than or equal to 6? So if we look at how many parts this is divided into, it's divided into 8 parts, and it wants the number greater than or equal to 6. So the number greater than or equal to 6, 6, 7, and 8. So that's going to be 3. So now we need to look at the number less than 6, and that's going to be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's a total of 5, and that's my ratio. So you're going to have 3/5. Okay, what are the odds against spinning a number less than 3? So this is the odds against spinning. So it's going to be the number of unfavorable outcomes divided by the number of favorable outcomes. So I'm going to say the numbers which are going to be greater than or equal to 3 on the spinner. There's greater than or equal to 3. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's a total of 6. And then we're going to divide it by the numbers less than 3. if we count the numbers less than 3, 2 and 1, it's going to be over 2. We have to reduce, and I'm going to get 3. Okay. All right, next we're going to talk about mutually exclusive events. Mutually exclusive, you're saying that events can never occur at the same time. So what I mean by that is you're saying that if A and B which are two different events, are mutually exclusive, then you're going to say that you have the probability of A or B is going to be the probability of A plus the probability of B. Okay, so let's just say, let's look at some different events, and we're going to look at flipping a coin. So again, this is a coin. I don't know why it cut it off, but it did. So we're going to flip a coin, and we're going to say, what is the probability of heads or tails? Heads and tails are two different sides of the coin. You cannot have a head while you cannot flip a head while you flip to a tail. So those are both individual. So we're going to have to look at this individually. So we're going to say the probability of flipping heads plus the probability of flipping tails. So you're saying the probability of heads or tails. So that's equal to the probability of heads plus the probability of tails. So I know that there is a possibility of heads or tails, so that's the possible outcomes. I know I can only have a head once, so that's 1/2. I know that I can only flip to a tail once, so that's another 1/2, and my solution is going to be 1. Okay, let's look at it again through a dice. Okay, you roll a fair 6-sided die. What is the probability even or less than 2? So if we talk about rolling a dice, you're going to say that you're going to have the probability of rolling an even plus the probability of less than 2. So let's talk about our sample space. We know that our sample space is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So since our sample space is 1 through 6, because you're talking about the faces of the die, we know that each of these is going to have a denominator of 6. So possibility of even would be some number over 6 plus the possibility of less than 2 would be over 6 as well. So the possibility of rolling an even number, so now we have to look at our even numbers, and I have 2, 4, and 6. So I have 3 over 6. The possibility of rolling less than a 2, well, the only number less than a 2 is a 1, so I have a 1. And then when I add those together, you're going to get 4 over 6, and then I have to simplify. So that's going to give me 2/3. And that's the probability of even or less than 2. Okay. Okay, now lastly, pick a card at random. What is the probability of picking an even or less than 2 card? This cut this off, but these are the cards we want. So we know that our sample space is going to be 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. And we're looking for P of even or less than 2. So when we break this up, we're seeing the possibility or the probability of pulling an even random card plus the possibility of pulling a card less than 2. So let's count our sample space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have a total of 6. So that's going to be my denominator. And let's count the even numbers. I have a 2 and a 6. So that's going to be 2, 6 plus the probability of choosing a number less than 2. If I look at my sample space, the only number less than 2 is 1. So that's 1 out of 6. And then when I add these, I'm going to get 3 out of 6. And then when I simplify, I get 1/2. So the probability of even or less than 2 equals 1/2.